This is Spilled Ink.
I got really tired of the regular world. Tattooing basically was all I could do, but it was illegal, so how do I claim that in taxes? So I got a regular job. I was a store manager for KB Toys.
Wow. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Spilled Ink. I have on the line Logan Aguilar, originally from Brownsville, New York. He's been tattooing for 23 years and he's currently tattooing out of SOHO Ink. What's going on, Logan?
How you guys doing?
What's going on, man? So I'm actually very interested in your story because I've seen your work on Instagram and just the cover-up work you do is insane. So why don't you tell our listeners how you got started and what brought you into tattooing?
Skateboarding.
Really?
Skateboarding got me into tattooing. I did airbrushing and everything, and I made friends with the guy who basically taught me how to tattoo. And what is it? I think I airbrushed like a stone wall with dragon eyes and cracks and stuff like that. I was hanging out in the shop, just kind of like letting him do his thing. And one thing led to another. I wound up making friends with him. And over time, he always jokes around. He's like, well, I didn't teach you how to tattoo. You taught yourself. I get what he's saying because it was me taking the reins from what he showed me.
Right.
But he taught me how to tattoo, so I always give him a lot of credit for that.
Nice. How old were you when you first started?
I was about 14 when I made friends with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you do your apprenticeship with him also, or?
Yeah, my apprenticeship with him as well. So started tattooing about 16.
Okay.
About part-time at 16 to about 18. Once I turned 18, I went full-time. Unfortunately, I got kicked out of high school.
Okay.
So, I didn't finish that. But I will travel.
What'd you get kicked out for, if you don't mind me asking?
Fighting.
That's always it.
My family moved to Queens, and I'm a kid from Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say the area they moved to was a little rough for being a really tiny dude. I think I weighed like $125 for like a bulk of my life, and then all of a sudden like 25 hit, and then I was like, oh, I'm 248.
Well, that's it. You gotta stake your claim in Brooklyn to walk all over you.
Yeah,
you know how it is. But that's great that you had tattooing to fall back on, pretty much.
Yeah, what's so funny? I was told to treat it always as a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything was illegal back then. So they're like, yeah, one day the cops can come in and just shut everything down. So don't even stress it.
Wow.
This is meant to be just hang out and enjoy your boys' times and do decent art. At the time, the guys really weren't doing like much other than the flash that you can buy, like that old Cherry Creek stuff.
Right.
So, and then I was really like always into art. So I was doing designs that he told me, no, nobody can do that. And today I do those designs and he still tells me, you're not a tattoo artist, you're a painter. It's different. I'm like, oh, I don't win.
That's awesome though. At a time, how was it tattooing in a time that it was illegal?
It was scary. I was a kid hanging out with like older guys.
Right.
There's some little fights go on, little internal struggles, worrying that they're going to piss off or tattoo the wrong cop who's not cool with it. And it kind of blew up in our face. But he always took care of me. He always made sure he kept me out of all the troubles, treated me like a little brother. So that's realistically, that was it.
That's awesome. So at what point did you say, okay, this is what I'm doing, and started taking it more seriously and like stepping up your work?
I got really tired of the regular world.
Don't we all?
What was it? I was a store manager for KB Toys because tattooing basically was like all I could do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I emancipated myself. I took care of myself.
Really?
So yeah. So realistically, my income was tattooing money.
Wow.
But, it was illegal. So how do I claim that in taxes? So I got a regular job. I was a store manager for KB Toys.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long were you there for?
KB from 17 years old to about 23, 24.
Damn. That's the way to do it, though. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So it was good, just chill, just trying to stay under the radar back then. And now it's just kind of like, oh, okay. I can do pretty pictures with nobody chasing me. The IRS isn't chasing me to take my money.
So where was the first shop that you started at? Was that in Brooklyn also?
Oh, that was with him. That was like a underground studio. It was like literally like him and like two other guys. And it was like by name only. That's really kind of like how it worked back then.
Yeah.
Didn't really have a name. It's just like, oh, it's like just, yo, Tony, go to Tony's spot. That's it. Which Tony? Crazy Tony. There's like 1,000 crazy Tonys. Every Tony wanted to be known as Crazy Tony.
Did he have a story that made him Crazy Tony, or?
Oh man, he used to run with Savage Skulls. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
That old like biker gang in New York City. They like terrorized everybody. They used to be like those guys that people would call for muscle.
Okay.
And he's very much. I always joke around. I say he looks like a Klingon. He's like very much like a warrior. I was just like, oh, okay, you need a hug.
Yeah. Hey, better have Crazy Tony at your back though, right?
Yeah. Always,
sure.
Every day.
That's great.
Whenever stuff went wrong, I used to be like, yo, Tony, I'm not hurting my hands.
Tony, get the bat. We got a problem.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm always interested to hear a fellow New Yorker's story, especially because you work at a SOHO Ink where you guys are heavyweights putting out great work on a daily. How did you make that transition from a kid in Brooklyn and Queens to the city?
Believe it or not, I moved away. I was in Florida from 24 years old to about, I think I was 28.
Okay.
Just before the crash.
Okay.
So I moved back just before that because I was reading the tea leaves and I saw the signs. I was like, let me get my butt back to the city.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came back, I didn't want to be in Brooklyn anymore. I was kind of like trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself again. And I partnered up with Venus Modern Body Arts, took over. We rebuilt that. And that shop was doing great. And then what happened to me? Oh, the building got sold.
Oh, wow.
We rebuilt it. We started making money again. The studio was doing so bad.
Mm-hmm.
We started making money again. And literally within 2 years, I lost the studio. I was like, I was assed out.
Oh.
By that time I had a kid. My wife and me were getting married. So things got crazy for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with, I got a job offer while I was in transition from losing the studio to go work at Last Rites.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked for Last Rites for about almost 6 years. So SOHO wound up being something that when I was leaving Last Rites, I really wanted a fresh start with younger artists that really were reminding me that tattooing wasn't something to be so frustrated over. It was more to be about an artist and enjoy the camaraderie of being with other like-minded people that wanted to push their boundaries.
Right.
And I've been coming from Last Rites, that studio was like very much like a dark art studio, trying to push you to think in that direction.
Okay.
And that has a place in time,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a calling for that particular type of tattoo artist, but it's one of those things, time change. I realized that it was something that it really wasn't me anymore, and it was time to move.
Right.
And SOHO basically was like, when push came to shove, I went down there. I knew one of the managers, and it turned out I knew the guy who was actually running the shop. And I was just like, yeah, definitely. He remembers me from my crazy days before I was a dad. So
Mm-hmm.
he was like all about it.
That's great, bro. How is it working with those artists? Like, how did they push you? And because I follow a bunch of them on Instagram, like Michaela Botten and Dave Tattoos. Like, they're putting out great work.
It's funny, like watching Dave and Michaela, Lewis, everybody that works there, their styles are so uniquely themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it reminds me to like look for my own signature.
Right.
What made me an artist? What made me want to do cover-ups? What made me want to continue doing Japanese?
Mm-hmm.
So it pushes my boundaries mentally. It's like, how do I take, instead of being that guy that just does really good tattoo cover-ups, and how do I put my own signature to it?
Right.
And realistically, that's what those guys do. I mean, come on, working with Michaela, watching Dave work, that's beautiful stuff, man.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, the line work, the layout, Dave's ability to just create these really gnarly, beautiful line works and these beautiful like pop images, and his color choices. The same thing with Michaela and her movements.
Right.
And I'm tattooing, was it 23 years? Michaela's not tattooing that long. You know, it's really good to feel like this young energy, and she's not jaded.
Right.
You know, she hasn't seen big names treat good workers poorly.
Right.
You know?
Don't sell yourself short either, bro. Your work is incredible. Just to draw on somebody the way that you do, and like you take that whole concept, and cover-ups on their own are hard to do, but you take it to a whole nother level.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
That's all like old school. I always say it's like illusion. People think it's like, oh my God, he's figured something out. It's like, no, it's literally me going back and needing to restart my mind. Because when you work with other big name like Yumiko and Darwin and Jose, these guys are like reinventing tattooing.
Right.
And realistically, you know, I was the guy who did all the tattoos that nobody wanted to do because they were too difficult. Nobody wanted to do the cover up. Nobody wanted to deal with the guy that had the heavy scars.
Mm-hmm.
I took on all the hard projects. So what a lot of my background is just going back to my old roots of tattooing and using what I learned working alongside them,
right,
and blending the two.
That's incredible. I'm always fascinated. Do you approach a cover-up differently than you would a regular piece?
Oh, I do, all day long. And that is like the hardest thing. First, I have to approach the person like they've been assaulted. No, for real. Oh my gosh. When you talk to people about doing cover-ups,
mm-hmm.
First thing is they're going to give you a list of no's.
Right.
Of like all the things they don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, okay, you've seen my work. You know I'm going to give you what I can give you. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, I can only do so much.
Right.
You know, if the skin is really dark skin and it's a cover-up, I have to be really blunt about ethnicity, skin texture, the chance for maybe getting scarred.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you have to be real honest with it. And I always tell people I'm actually pretty limited as a tattoo artist. There's certain things I don't do, you know, like religious stuff I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Am I amazing at it? Not really. You know, my background, because I spent 6 years working at a studio that does dark art, tends to be within the dark art realm.
Right.
Not meaning that it's like satanic, but like it's not the happy-go-lucky art, poppy stuff that most people are looking for.
Right.
It's been a rediscovery of myself this last year. Artistically. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been doing a lot more Japanese again.
I have.
So that's what direction I'm going back into, because that's literally where I was when I first started, was Japanese artwork. So I'm going full circle.
Okay.
Going back to what really makes me me.
Right. So how did you develop that style? At what point did it develop into what you do? And like, were you conscious of that, or did it just kind of happen organically?
For me, it's how do I reinvent the wheel? Because I start getting bored with it after a while,
mm-hmm.
realistically. How do I look at every tattoo, every fad, and feel like people are not guiding their clients in the right direction for themselves?
Right.
We're just happy with whatever Pinterest tattoo the client brings in,
mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
But with the art of cover-ups, it limits that, because you can't pull a Pinterest image and say that's going to cover that tattoo beautifully.
Right.
You know, and the difference between a bad cover-up and a good cover-up is a good cover-up, you shouldn't be able to tell that it's a cover-up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's how I learned.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I was taught. Just using plain black to cover everything is kind of a cop-out. And I always tell people, learn how pigment works. Learn how the body reacts.
Right.
Identify scar tissue. Can you tell if that person used a big liner? Is there any key signs? You know, if they use like a 14-round liner back then, they're packing all this color in, but they're chewing it, mm-hmm. depending on the person's ability to tattoo.
That's actually a good point that you make. So as a client walking in who wants a cover-up, what's the best advice that you can give them before coming in?
A lot of the times I tell people, when it comes to like getting a brand new tattoo, if it's a fresh tattoo, I'm pretty flexible. Mm-hmm. I usually say the sky's the limit. I just don't do like I'm not a lettering guy. Like I can draw beautiful letters because, you know, we all studied the book of, was it BJ Betts, mm-hmm. you know, and study those boog lettering mm-hmm. all day long early in our careers.
Right.
But I'm not a lettering guy. You know, I can do it if I wanted to, but it's not really me.
Right.
But if a client wants to come to me, it's really like, Logan, I like your style. Tell me what you like about it, and then show me other artists that you like. Not trying to copy them, but give me inspiration. Or I always say I'm a big culturalist. Mm-hmm. anything that I can put my finger on culturally that I can read up on. So I always tell people is like, just bring me stuff that really speaks to you. But if you're not ready for yourself and you feel like you want to get tattooed, just come with an open mind, have an idea, and be ready to talk, because I actually like to talk to people.
Right.
Now, I do have bad news for the public.
Go ahead, hit 'em.
I'm literally booked till 2021.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, it is the most stressful thing out there. So I'm always trying to like make big holes in my schedule so then I can take personal time. You know, I got 2 kids. I have a wife. So it's difficult, you know. I love tattooing. This has been my passion since I was a kid.
Right.
So for me, it's difficult. My wife always says, I don't know how to separate tattooing from my regular life, which is true. You know, I don't. If I'm depressed, if a client comes in that day that's already been booked and he says, Logan, I liked what we talked about, but I want you to do just whatever you want. You want to talk about changing my mood? That will fix my life.
That's great.
It's the silliest thing.
I wish they could all be like that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like 23 years have given me a little bit of leeway.
Yeah. Pick and choose. You deserved it. So now, being booked that far in advance, I mean, obviously they come in with their reference photos, but you do most of your drawing on the spot. So like, do you have everything ready beforehand, or you just do it that day?
Usually what I do is I throw like a billion references on a screen.
Okay.
So if it's a figure like a samurai, I'll have a conversation with them about what era I'm using as my reference.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about what this particular armor, what class it was, if it was lower class, higher class, so on and so forth. So the client has tons of information. So when they look back at it, they can go, my artist knew what he was talking about. He gave me this much information. I know what it is. And I go from there.
Right. That's perfect.
Yeah. I did this Frank Frazetta freehand recently that is basically, it's the Death Dealer, his like most famous character that he used to paint. And it's not a copy, you know, most people take and they just print out the same image, you know. I took like 6 photos of different variations of his character and I freehanded the whole thing. It's just so it's a one-off versus we're taking and copying the same image 1,000 times.
Yeah, the trace and paste.
Yeah, social media has helped broaden careers, but it's also limited clients. The internet and Google can be like the overglorified Flash shop. You know what I mean? So it's like, all we do is Flash, but all we have is the internet now. So all we're doing is printing the same 100 roses. How many times do you think that one rose has been tattooed or attempted to be tattooed correctly?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. I have a bunch of people who brought me my work in and they're like, oh, I want this one exactly. And I'm like, well, first off, I did that. And second off, you're not going to get that one exactly because I drew that specifically for one person.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you get that a bunch too, but obviously the level that you're at, I'm sure they come in with your work thinking like it's someone else's and like, oh, I like what this guy did.
You know, it's a nice feeling to see them like not recognize it. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that piece, blah, 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 talk about it. But my clients tend to recognize what they want.
Right.
On Instagram, it's difficult for me to reply to everybody.
Sure.
But every now and then I get the person that like takes an image of another person's tattoo. I want the same exact tattoo. It's like, come on. When I post, I tend to talk a lot about it being original, being something designed just for the client.
Right. I mean, that's really the barrier I feel like a lot of clients don't understand. And like you said, all this information is out there, but it's still very limiting as to what they bring you, especially in my neighborhood too. A lot of religious pieces we do. I mean, do you have anything like that around where you are now or like where you were when you first started?
I mean, I've watched the eras change. So I grew up in that era of tribal and Celtic knotwork. You remember that? So I find myself laughing because I've had a few people come in and I'll be like, oh, I recognize that particular tattoo artist's artwork. And they're like, no way. And I'll be like, yeah, I grew up here. I remember Spider. Who doesn't remember that guy as they've been around, you know? You know, so many old school names. So it's just like recognizing art. And then today it's like, what is it? We're doing in SOHO. I watch them come in now with like little thin fine line work. But, you know, it's very much like Pinteresty little stuff.
Yeah, like minimalism is becoming a big thing, especially in Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's difficult for me because at the end of the day, my heart breaks because I'm like, does that little simple image truly express an important portion of you? Because that's how I approach tattooing is how am I helping my client express themselves? Or am I helping them through the trauma of having a bad tattoo for like 20 plus years?
Right.
you know?
And I think that's what it is too, like the longevity of it. Because people want it now. They don't think about like years from now how to look
Yep.
or how to hold up.
I'm looking forward to the era when like all these people are old and these tattoos look really bad and everyone just looked like they were like in some kind of weird foreign gang.
That's a good way to look at it.
I was like, oh, see, we're all equal now. We all look like we had rough lives.
Yeah. So what was your most difficult tattoo? I mean, you deal with the most difficult part of tattooing, which is cover-ups, but do you have one in particular that you remember?
You know what? I do not have photos of this tattoo.
Okay.
But she's had these tattoos since she was a kid. You know, she had this like scarred angel on her shoulder, some jacked up work on her back.
Oh, man.
And she's like, I don't even go to the beach because I don't feel comfortable showing my skin.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I'm talking about that angel looked like someone went on her with like 24 round liner and just chewed her skin to hell. It was so bad.
Poor thing.
And then her back, she had like a hot mess of like mayo ketchup that I couldn't even tell. And we made an entire sleeve because it just had like a bunch of randomness. And I remember the first time she came to me, she handed me an envelope, which was like a tip for the work being so nice. And she just cried. And she told me that she had not been to the beach since she was a kid and that she spent her entire summer at the beach.
Oh, wow.
And then after that, we worked on her back. We did like this big unicorn with a dream catcher and covered all that stuff up.
That's great, bro.
You know, I didn't start being a good tattoo artist.
Right.
I gradually got better over time. You know, it took 23 years to get to the point where I'm at. You know, I freak out because I'm going, man, are the tattoos that I did back then holding up well enough to still be considered decent? Or are they looking like some of these jacked up pieces of art that I see come in?
Yeah. I mean,
You know?
23 years in the game. That's absolutely true. I wonder, like, have you ever had to cover up your own work?
Oh, man. What have I done? Oh, I'm friends with the first guy I ever tattooed.
Okay.
So we're in conversations. We're going to be covering up a piece that I did on him. But when I first started, remember acetate? So like the acetate, if you weren't careful, the stencil would run away on you. So the entire thing was like this Japanese anime girl from chest to back down the arm.
Okay.
Within the first like 30 minutes, I wiped away half the stencil. So back then I still had the ability to do like freehand. So I was doing that. So I basically freehand the whole thing. And back then it was like Pelican ink. Over 23 years, it's just like the most dull thing right now. So I was like, oh, I can cover that easy. That's nothing.
That's great.
That's the one tattoo I know I can't wait to cover because it's the first tattoo. That's going to be the funny video that I do.
Throw that up on Instagram when you do it. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the people who I talk to, they haven't bounced around as much as you have. I'm sure like just staying in New York, you've seen your cast of characters come in. Is there any one story in particular that's like your most outrageous story?
Oh, man. This one will have to be in Florida.
Okay.
And tattooing and piercing at the time. And this young lady came in. She was like, oh, I want to get my hood pierced. I'm like, yeah, okay, no problem, whatever. And at the time, we were like really like pushing the boundaries on safety. So I'm wearing like a face mask with a visual shield.
Okay.
Because we've had stories where people have been urinated on while piercing.
Really?
Yeah. So I put the shield on and I'm ready. And I go in to go start marking up. And literally, the smell hits me in the face. Because at the time, I was eating horrible. Because I would spend 14 hours a day at a tattoo studio.
Right.
I would eat like $1 menu bag a day. Like, give them like $20, get me some burgers, and I'll eat that throughout my day. I was young. I was going to live forever. And literally, I had just finished eating lunch. I had like 3 cheeseburgers. No exaggeration. The smell hits me through the mask. I couldn't hold the food in.
No.
I threw it up all over myself. The mask, projectile vomited, hit the mask in my ears behind me. I take the mask off. I'm wiping the vomit off my face going, what the hell is that?
Oh my God. Did you get any on her?
Oh, no. She's realized right away. She pulled up her pants and everything, and she ran out the studio. And the girl, tattoo artist / body piercer, is there, and she's just laughing at me. She's like, I heard. We knew about that girl. I'm just going, oh, you guys set me up.
That's insane.
That was like the worst thing ever.
How'd you come back from that?
For years, I had that smell stuck in my nose. So every time anybody like, oh, you remember that story? I would smell it and get nauseous. Yeah, it was bad.
That's so funny. I have a similar story like that too. It was with a heavy-set woman. My brother was tattooing her, and we come into the shop, and the whole shop smells like Chinese food.
Holy
But it was just from her sweating because he did an area right above her vagina. We call it the fupa.
Yeah.
It was in our noses for like a week and a half. We'd spray the shop. It'd still be in there. You always get people like that.
Yeah, it was bad. No, that smelled like, to me, it's dead raccoon. Yeah, it smelled like dead raccoon. Like raccoons have a funk to them, but rotting dead flesh. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever smelled.
That's incredible.
Yeah, Florida. Body heat and tight pants don't get along.
I was just going to say, that Florida heat will get you. That's so good. Obviously at SOHO, world-class artists in there. Who was like the coolest person that walked into your shop that you got to tattoo?
Oh, man. I'm a giant dork and I love me some anime.
Mm-hmm.
So Full Metal Alchemist is like one of my favorite animes. So Michaela tattooed one of the voice actors for the show. And I love the actor. He plays Natsu in Fairy Tail right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a super chill person. I dork out whenever I see anybody I love their work or I respect.
Right.
And I get really shy. I own it, like to the point where I can't even make eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things. I saw him and the guy who does our social media is laughing at me because he knows that I'm bad with meeting people I respect.
Right.
And I literally am like this little kid going, no. So he calls me over because he wants to give Michaela a tip, but he knows Michaela's just going to give it back to him. So he goes, hey, you. And he does the voice. Hey, you, get over here. And I'm just going, oh, my God, Natsu's calling me over. Oh, what am I going to do? So he calls me over and then I go, can I get a picture with you? Of course, I did the dark dorky thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over there like, I got pictures with him. I do the same thing with like tattoo artists. I met Robert Hernandez in Canada years ago.
That's awesome.
And I literally like went backwards in time. I turned into a 15-year-old boy. I love your work. And then another year I met Philip Liu. And sure enough, I didn't know how to talk to him. I was just like, oh man, you're like practically my entire inspiration for tattooing.
Thank you. Yeah, when I meet somebody that I love, I'll go right at them and I have to take a picture. I'll never get a chance like this again. I need to like say hello and like they need to notice me.
Yeah. Oh no. See, I'm like super shy. I always say I'm like very socially awkward. So I always say I can talk to my clients or potential clients all day long. I can talk tattoo, but to admit out loud that I admire you for your ability and what you do, it freaks me out. So at the end of the day, I'm just kind of like, nope. I don't want to make a fool of myself in public.
At your level, at like 23 years in the game, who's changing the game for you right now? Like, who do you follow that you're like, wow, I'm really enjoying what they're doing right now?
Man, I follow like a lot of like really amazing Japanese tattooers going from England, coming from Australia. But I also keep up with the guys that do all the photorealism, which I still love. So you got guys like Steve Butcher, Yumiko, you got Jose Joseed.
Mm-hmm.
He's amazing. Darwin, all those guys are really pushing the boundaries in photorealism and technique, pushing themselves past how we approach tattooing.
Yeah.
And the Japanese has always been something that really I love. I keep tabs to see who's doing what or what techniques are changing.
Very cool. I have an interview scheduled with Yumiko in a couple weeks. I can't even fathom how he does what he does.
Yeah. It's amazing. That whole group he runs with, that Rat Pack, every one of them are doing just phenomenal work. And I always feel like people forget what it is to push boundaries. And these are artists that are always pushing the boundaries. How can they do another piece of artwork and just take it to the next step?
Right.
But then you have like old school tattoo artists who talk negatively about their technique. I was like, you can't talk negatively about it. It's a different form of art. We all know white is never going to stay white.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's not something to argue or bicker about in the tattoo industry. That whole craze when we had people, I just want a white ink tattoo. It's going to look like a scar. We all knew it. Mm-hmm. It happened.
Yep.
It's
so hard trying to tell clients that too, because usually it's like one of their first couple ones, or like they want like a bunch of highlights with a lot of white in it. And I'm just like, it's not going to look like that over time.
Yeah.
Like your first time at the beach, it's just going to like come right out.
Yep.
it's difficult. You know, social media really limits that.
I give my clients a 3rd degree on their tattoos. So like if we're doing a big project, there's a rule. You're not allowed to do the sun or the beach. If you cannot stick to that rule, then we cannot do this project during this time frame. Then you have to wait.
Really?
Yeah. Because why cook and damage the tattoo in mid-process? That first 3 months is the most important time for the ink to settle, you know, because when you first put it in, it's going in, but it's sitting on the surface still.
Right.
It hasn't bonded to your cells fully.
Right.
So a pigment like yellow or white, it could get sunburnt so much easier and get damaged. Blood getting stuck within it, and it's dark and muddy.
Right.
We don't want that. So if you can't stick to it, then let's not do it. You know?
Did you always know that, or like is that something that you learned over time and then you started telling your clients about?
That was Florida. Florida taught me that. Florida taught me a lot of like skincare issues. You know, I learned about the issues on working on people like roofers.
Yeah.
You know, guys that work on these tar roofs or tin roofs with the sun reflecting back at them. Their skin was like leather, like being burnt alive.
Right. What part of Florida were you in?
I was Miami, Kissimmee, and Tampa. I was out there for a few years, you know, made good friends and everything. I haven't really been back. The world has changed too much for me to feel comfortable down there.
Listen, I think you're in a great spot.
Hell yeah, man.
And I appreciate your time doing this. I really do.
No worries, man.
Like I said, if I'm in Soho, I'm definitely want to stop by and just like say what's up.
Definitely, brother.
Thanks everybody for listening. And thank you again, Logan.
All right, brother.
I appreciate it, brother. Have a good night. That wraps it up with Logan Aguilar. You can stay up to date on what Logan's doing by following him on Instagram at Logan Aguilar Art or by visiting LoganAguilar.com. Join us next week when I speak with Jay Carmel, the TikTok tattoo guy from Northeast Maryland.
You know, you either like me or you don't, and it seems to be how it is, like in tattooing and like even on the TikTok app. You either really, really like me or you just like fuck that guy.
And he talks about how he got started using the app and how it changed his life.
It kind of hit me that maybe I should start making videos about these stories, or at least, you know, based on the stories and things that have happened. And a lot of it, you know, if you watch, it happens in pretty much every tattoo shop across America.
Spilled Ink is produced by Fulton Street Music Group. Our producers are Kleio Kolitsopoulos and Alex Fulton. Our music is by Cat Blaster. I'm your host, Mike Maldonado. Follow us on Instagram at SpilledInkTattpod.